I want to say a few things about the Charlie Kirk assassination. And first of all, I just wanted you to keep in mind, if you're checking this out, I hope you enjoy it. But I'm not a professional podcaster. Like, I'm not a professional speaker. I'm not a podcaster. Like, I'm not going to do everything perfect and have everything perfect. I have some notes here that hopefully I can follow along with smoothly and you enjoy the discussion. So I've been watching Charlie Kirk quite a bit lately, and I historically love conservative talk radio hosts. I don't classify myself entirely as conservative. So in a way, I listen to a lot of the rhetoric, and I enjoy rhetoric. Rhetoric is kind of like an art form in a way. So I'm already going off topic, but Mark Levin, for example, talks a lot of shit about Qatar because Qatar was harboring the guys from Gaza, but the US military and country has an alliance with Qatar. So I enjoy the rhetoric, but there's like a stone coldness to hearing and thinking about stuff like this, because you can't agree or put your complete weight behind any one thing, for example, and there's no reason that I should do that. Like, there's nobody paying me to like think about certain things a certain way, for example. But I think that'd be cool if there was an AI agent, just as a side note, that could chime in and like remind me of the points that I'm talking about and some of the things that I've mentioned or checked out in my research, include citations. I think that'd be great. But I just made a podcast with a buddy of mine, two buddies of mine, a kid named Tim and his girlfriend Cassandra, a guy named Tim, and they both sounded great, extremely intelligent. I tried to screen record the podcast on my phone, but it only recorded 11 minutes of it. And then there was an embarrassing part about like half an hour through the podcast where I forgot what I was talking about. And this is actually something I've talked about in the past. Like, there can actually be like rhetoric games that sort of lure you, like using AI, like a conversationalist, to kind of like lure you into complex thinking where you like have to get back to your point, or for example, and tricks you in a way in order to get into positions where you're ready to deal with situations where you have to quickly change the topic or keep stuff being entertaining. But there's two distinctions that I talk about when discussing Charlie Kirk, because when somebody dies who's very controversial and had a lot of opinions, for example, you're not necessarily required to mourn his death, but I think there's a distinction between people that celebrate his death and people that say they don't agree with what he said. Like, there was a president that died recently, a liberal president, Jimmy Carter. And Trump came out and he said he really didn't agree with a lot of what Jimmy Carter said. And like, when you get into it and like somebody dies and you research them and stuff, you're not required to, you can save your hate for a person until after they died, you know? But I think there's a distinction between saying I really disagree with this person and saying celebrating their death. Because once you celebrate their death, it gets into trickier circumstances, because now you're saying that you support political violence. And like, if there are enough people that say they support political violence, then the other side will be like, touche. And then they'll come back, and this is basically what happened before the Julio-Claudian dynasty at the late Republic, you know, around 50 BC, 44 BC in ancient Rome. And it had been happening for years, basically like civil war, civil strife. My own take on the whole potentiality of a civil war is that it probably couldn't happen in America. But once you get to situations like where you have Donald Trump denying the election results, and there could have been like a split figure or something that the Supreme Court would have to decide on that could become extremely contentious, and the US military would basically have to choose a side in that circumstance. But like, talking about the Russian Revolution, talking about the French Revolution, I don't think that stuff is necessarily compatible with modern life, because the military just has so much more equipment than the average guy. So you can't just have like a ragtag group of people go out and like take over something. I guess in the French revolutions there was military involvement, but honestly I'm not an expert on that. You know what I mean? But I personally think it's horrible that Charlie Kirk died. And I have been listening to him, his podcasts, in particular his conversation with Governor Newsome, and I have quite a few of ideas about it and thoughts about it. But one thing I was mentioning to my buddy before we were rudely cut off by the screen record on my phone during our WhatsApp conversation is that it's almost like Google is like, whenever you search for anything on Google, like it only gives you liberal search results, you know? So it's like, if you try to find something about Charlie Kirk, it's just pages and pages of Charlie Kirk's insensitive, Charlie Kirk's this and that, and it doesn't like link you to Charlie Kirk, kind of. It's like Google search results is like so far slanted to the left that it almost like eliminates you from existence. And I mean, I have some views that are rightward, and it's easy for people that talk about like inner city crime and like needing a more authoritarian control on crime figures and so forth. It's easy for them to look brash. And I had a point about the statue of the black lady. It's called Rooted in the Stars in Central and in Manhattan and Times Square. And what I was saying about it is that who cares? It's a nice black lady, and people say she's slightly overweight. You know, whatever your opinion about it is, like she looks like a nice enough lady. So I'm like, so it's easy for conservatives to look brash when they're like, oh, look at this horrible statue. Like, it's almost like it would be such a smart setup to create a statue of a black lady in Times Square just to like see their reaction and be like, look, you hate this statue of a black lady. But I personally don't, like, I kind of don't mind it. I think it's kind of interesting. But I was also saying in the podcast, like, but there's also my art too. And like, if it were up to me, I would make like some crazy dichroic glass sculpture with like a fumigator. You know, maybe we'd have like screens that are connected to other cities. Maybe we'd have like a playground built in with like all kinds of like interesting mechanical stuff that obviously would be safe and so forth. But it's like, but there's another point of contention about the whole argument is like, you could have done something very innovative, but instead like this modernist world is sort of just like, oh, we just have to put that there, and it's not really about like the technicality and the innovation and the engineering and so forth. So my whole point was that the conservatives will look to brash coming against that, even if I don't entirely agree with the way that it was conceived and executed in the first place. But it's almost like Charlie Kirk got wiped. You know, I'm talking about, I'm trying to keep up with, keep a grip on what I'm saying here. But like when you search on Google, like you can't find it. And I heard in a recent Charlie Kirk podcast, he was saying that 1 in 20 black men will be murderers in their lifetime. And another point that I have written down here is it's so easy for conservatives to like almost get shouted down like at the get-go because it sounds racist to say something like that, but it's kind of like a computer program calling a function. You know, it's saying like, what about this function does the computer act on? How does the computer act on this function? And like there are two different sort of function calls, like, because there's a function call where you have just so much compassion and you say, we understand your situation. We understand, you know, that you've faced adversity and civil rights and slavery and so forth. So like we have a leg up in a way, and it's like we have to have compassion to understand that like the circumstances of people are very complex, you know. But when you look at the function call, like we're calling this function. And it's so easy to say, and even that statistic itself is very biased because the statistic assumes that each black person would have killed one person. So if each average person who is killed by black people is each black person kills multiple people, then for example, if the statistic of each black person killed 2 people, then it would only be 2.5%. Then it would only be 5%. You know, and there are a lot of professional hitmen that kill hundreds and hundreds of people, you know, when we've seen this in like organized crime documentaries and so forth. But like the way Trump is going about like trying to establish law and order, I support. I think that he is doing it in a very political way, like new scum, for example. It's normal for conservatives to call him new scum. And I'll just jump to another point real quick about Governor Newsom. I watched the conversation with Charlie Kirk and Governor Newsom as well. And Governor Newsom has a podcast where he's talking to conservatives. And like every conversation that I've listened to with him and conservatives, he's being very open-minded about it. And I see it like he's embracing this liberal, like, North Star mentality where they're like the shining light on the hill, and like they're open to discussion, they're open to information. But Charlie Kirk's conversation with him was absolute devastation. I was joking with my friend, it was like Charlie Kirk put like a burlap sack over his head, put him in the trunk of his car, and threw him off a bridge. Like, that was how bad it was. And Governor Newsom was being open-minded the whole time. And his signature thing he'll say is, I appreciate that. Like, if you say something, he'll say, I appreciate it. And Governor Newsom, with his presidential bid, is there are a lot of things. He now has the ability to say that he started a podcast where he's being open-minded with conservatives and basically got shouted down the whole time. You know, but he's also putting it in the minds of these podcasters, these right-wing podcasters, when they talk about Newsom, they could be like, yeah, Newsom did this and this that were liberal in California that caused it to collapse, but, you know, he's not that bad of a guy. So, like, if he gets enough of that not that bad of a guy, like, he might get enough conservative votes, for example. But the way that he portrays himself on the podcast, it's like he's ready to be sold. He's like Charlie Kirk just absolutely lambasted him and completely destroyed him. And to Newsom's credit, Newsom isn't a professional debater. He debated the Governor DeSantis of Florida, and it was just unwatchable. It was just a shouting match. Neither of them could get a word in edgewise. You know, Governor Newsom, you know, I don't see him as a very confrontational guy, but I see him like as a dangerous guy, polemically speaking. But it's like guys like Charlie Kirk that have all this aura and authority, like in the battle space, kind of between the ideologies. Like, he might have been able to connect with Newsom and like got Newsom to agree to certain things, or like that he supports certain things, and like found some kind of common ground, which I think is sort of necessary in this atmosphere, because it's almost like people are forgetting about the basis of why they're arguing in the first place. For example, the debate about wokeism, the debate about high taxation, the debate about minimum wage, the debate about all this stuff. Wokeism is about, we don't think that's good for people. Like, we think a victimhood mentality is going to hurt people in the long run. And people lose sight of that fact, and they just start, all they're hanging on is like the weight of pulling the other side down. Like, we're right about this, you're wrong about this. But don't be afraid to come back to the compassion, you know, and come back to the empathy. And I hear Charlie Kirk and Elon Musk saying that empathy is kind of like a societal construct that can actually be harmful in some ways. And I'm also open to that idea as well. You know, I've said this before, politics in a way is like entertainment for me. I like hearing the rhetoric, even from the left, but as a student of, you know, being entertained by politics, it also gets kind of old when the left is always like, their main argument is that you're just a bad person. Like, the main argument is like, oh, that's hateful, this is hateful, you're a bad guy, like, you're inhuman, you know. But that being said, like I've said, conservatives could also be like sort of more compassionate in a way. But I also mentioned that the conservatives are very compassionate, like when it comes to Christianity, for example, but that's like the worst place for both the parties to come together, because one party doesn't really believe in it as much. But like, if there's some thread of compassion that links people, I feel like that'd be beneficial. So the liberal media, so I want to say this, that yeah, the liberal media sort of will shout down, and you could even see Google as the liberal media. They kind of like have this aura of prestige where it's like, we want the compassionate to move forward. Like, we want to love one another, we want to take care of people, you know. And so they have this mouthpiece where it's like, if you say something where it sounds like, you know, you're anti-immigration, like you don't like Hispanics, or like you want like more of a white culture, you want to deport lots of people and create like a different culture, like a white Christianized culture, it's easy, like people are very easily spooked, you know. Where like, if you talk about the fact that black people make up 13% of the population, but they're charged with 50% of the murders, like, it just sounds like you're getting into territory that's like very punitive kind of, and it's like we have to lock down the schools. It's like we have to make sure the kids are like in their houses. We have to enforce curfews. We have to basically lock everything down. And it's like, it's easy to be like rattled, you know, and because I also had this written down, we're talking about intelligence, and that Elon Musk is talking about how if AI is trained to not tell you the correct statistics, or if AI is trained to say that a certain statistic that it's verifying for you is shallow or like isn't complete, and it doesn't give like weight to the actual situation, it's easy to like, even the function call when you're calling in like the geographic space in the compute space can in and of itself be bad. And it's like, I think that there should be some flexibility in thinking about this from both sides. You know what I mean? Because who knows, maybe some authoritarianism, not even, see, once you say authoritarianism, you picture like people locked down, like people in jail or something like that. But one of the recent things Charlie Kirk was talking a lot about was the George Floyd protests and riots and the George Floyd assassination. He said that George Floyd overdosed and was resisting arrest. My personal take from the George Floyd videos is that George Floyd was basically, he was throwing, like he was having a panic attack. I used to take Adderall for ADD. Sometimes when you take Adderall, I'm not saying that he was taking methamphetamines, but it can interfere with your breathing and it can make you feel like you can't get a full breath. So when they were trying to stuff him into the car, he was like having like a tantrum, having a panic attack, like he was not having it. He physically would not allow them in the car. And so I didn't think it was right for the cop to put his knee on George Floyd's head. But if I were the cop, I would have just forced him into the car. Like there were a couple cops on the scene, they could have got him into the car, but it's almost like he was retaliating in a way. But that being said, being like this unbiased political viewer, you know, I appreciate his take on George Floyd, and in particular the protests about it, because I support the protests, and in the podcast we're talking about how the left and right both feel like they're missing something from society and like they're owed something from society. But I also made a complex point, and I'm going to keep the metaphor even though it was really corny, is that a lot of people who say that we need to increase the price of education, we need to pay the teachers more, we need to pay more out in welfare settlements, we need more programs, sobriety programs, all of these programs and everything, and then people are finally going to be fine. And one of the things I was talking about in the George Floyd protests, all these people going out and partying on the street, and they're standing up for a good cause. I can't knock them for that, you know, and I'm not emotionally involved in this so much. But I'm sitting at home every night reading books before bed, living the most boring life, sitting on my computer, working on my artwork, writing something, you know what I mean? And like, I'm not out there partying. Like, I'm not like a social guy. I'm not a podcaster. I'm not a guy that's on TV or whatever. But I'm like, a lot of people, including myself, want forward momentum. And for example, I applied for like 20 internships because I didn't think I was going to be able to attend school over the summer before I learned about the GI Bill, and nobody accepted me. And so like it begs the question, like, look at my portfolio, look how many years I've been in art, look at all the staggering amount of work that I've done. And I'm a military veteran. I'm not complaining here. I'm still detached, but I'm explaining that there is some level of, it's like we want something more. Like they're canceling us. It's like Charlie Kirk got Googled, basically. Like we wiped him from the search results, you know. And it's like sometimes it feels like you're just wiped out. Like nobody gets to see you. Like you're just part of like you have a black stamp on you, or something, you know. And I was talking about like the George Floyd protests. You know, people want like more opportunity in life. And like me, and we think that it's kind of unfair, but like going out and protest, like if you have a rubber ducky, this is the metaphor I was talking about, and you have the rubber ducky and you put it in the pond, right? And that's the metaphor for like a citizen in society. What the citizen has to do to like make a livelihood is they have to educate themselves, they have to look for work, they have to find work, they have to support their family, they have to support, you know, people in their neighborhood and become sort of connected as like constituent parts in this network, right? And neighborhoods that lack like equality, for example, these networks are all like whacked out kind of. And it's easy to say, like, they failed us. Like, they didn't give us, like, look at our living situation, look at the crime in our neighborhood, look at the lack of education. We go to school, we can't even learn anything. We're graduating with second grade reading levels and everything. And it's easy to say, like, what did you guys do for us? But in a way, like, you're protesting against the lack of authority. Like, a lot of these fatherless households, sort of, there's nobody to tell you to do your homework. There's nobody to tell you to come in for school, you know, to get ready for school and so forth. So, like, I feel like it's not necessarily that, and a lot of these, like, Black Lives Matter, I don't have anything against the Black Lives Matter organization or any of these organizations that are advocating for trying to improve people's lives. But a lot of times it seems like what they want is like, oh, we need a grant for this, we need a grant, like, we're doing this for this. There was a rehab center across from me here on Auckland Avenue that was full of people from Alabama who were addicted to drugs or something, and they were paying $1,000 a day per person for these people to live in California, in one of the highest rent areas in the world, and smoke weed all day. You know, and it's like, we're helping, like, foster sobriety. And the language, I'll say the unentertaining aspect of, like, that type of language that they use, where, like, everything's like perfect and precise and professional, we're like fostering engagement or something. It's not that entertaining for me. And so you have this rubber ducky that's in the water, and the rubber ducky's like, I'm not moving fast enough. Like, I'm not gaining any momentum. You know, like me, the rubber ducky, right? And I'm using the GI Bill. It's like we're fueling the rubber ducky with gasoline, and then it has an engine and it's supposed to go across the pond. And they're like, we need to just put more gasoline in the rubber ducky. And so they have all these connections to it. We got the education, we got the money for this, we got the grants for this, you know, we got the housing programs, we got this organization, that organization. We're trying to, like, give you, you know, free clothes and all this stuff. But it's like, and combining the George Floyd protest with this point is that we don't have to put nitroglycerin into the rubber ducky. We shouldn't have to put nitric oxide dual octane 16-cylinder engines, all paid for by someone, into this rubber ducky, when, like, a good father could put you on the right path, you know. And that is authority. Like, some authority, like, the rubber ducky needs to fuel itself. You have to swim. You have to create that energy. Look at all the free information that we have in the world. You could, like, become a professional at a certain activity, or study the hiring rates for this job profession or whatnot. Like, you should be at home working on your future. And it's kind of ironic, we have all these people, and I was arguing with Cassandra about this during the podcast, and it felt like she crushed me, because I was basically saying, like, I was advocating the use of outhouses, you know, for homeless encampments and so forth, and that we should create housing that basically has affordability. I sort of lost the point. That I'm sort of meandering here. I should be stuck to my thing here. But we were also talking about, yeah, Newsome. So Newsome could have been sold, but he wasn't. And so that's sort of an example of, like, this fight mentality that we have, where it's like everything is like me versus you. And then sometimes when I'm even arguing with my friends of a different political strata, it's like the heart starts pounding kind of, and you're like, you need to like breathe and relax, because people are saying things that, like, you fundamentally sort of disagree with. But it's like, in this space that it's potential for like a healthier existence between the sort of political spectrums. We're also sort of arguing about the nature of intelligence. And as I said, Elon Musk is sort of arguing that, like, if you have woke AIs, that they'll just, like, cover up reality, sort of. Whereas if you had an AI that was to look at reality, and we're arguing about humanism versus mechanicalism, where if you look at the actual numbers, you say we have to, like, attack these numbers, basically. Like, we have to, AI could look at certain statistics and basically generalize about people in a way that would be sort of a throwback to a prior era, you know. And so there's, like, the dual perspective of seeing it, like, through the eyes of compassion, and we have to be very careful that we're not, like, triggering these feelings of inferiority in people. But there's also, like, these threads of intelligence, and a lot of the intelligence that we talk about, and a lot of, like, the way that we gauge people's intelligence is very social. You know, it's like the way that I'm able to say this and not forget what point of the way that I'm able to organize, like it's organizational expertise that people have like on a social basis that keep each other afloat. Like I'm saying something and I'm keeping you sort of your attention, right? Or like I'm not coming out, we're talking specifically about intelligence. Like I'm not coming out sounding dumb, for example. But it's almost like intelligence is kind of a thread, because if you go out into society and you interact with people from different businesses, your job primarily is to kind of manipulate people. And I know it sounds pretty harsh to say, and I was joking with my friend, like if we were to talk to like a counselor or a psychologist and you were saying, oh, I'm trying to just manipulate everybody. But think about it, you're trying to not get fired, manipulate your boss not to fire you, maybe to give you a raise, maybe to like you more than the next employee, and manipulate your wife not to leave you. Like we have all these things where we're trying to keep people sort of on this level, and like this is like a thread of intelligence, and it takes up so much compute power. You know, you go throughout your life and you're just trying to stay like right on the ridge of reality so that you're sort of safe, you know. But like they're like, look at an AI that's just completely unhinged and going after all the statistics. You know, it's like there are more like crime statistics for minorities, for example. And then if AI were to interpret the law literally, then a lot of people would be deemed criminals, you know. And for example, one of the things Charlie Kirk, I'm meandering here, but one of the things Charlie Kirk, oh shit, I lost my point. Okay, I did this in the podcast too, but hopefully you can appreciate, I'm not a professional and these are more complex threads. So we tend to see, okay, I have manipulation, the function call, bringing reality into perspective. How do you respond to reality, like once it hits you? And there's the organizational excellence aspect of it, but like there's also like the melding aspect of it. Like if we're talking about political intelligence in general, like there are people, like if you're playing a chess game and you have grandmasters, like Charlie Kirk was a grandmaster polemicist. Like he just absolutely destroyed Newsome, like in the most gruesome fashion imaginable. And like almost to the, like I personally felt like there should have been some respect put on Newsome's name. You know, like he is the governor and everything, but people call him New Scum. They say that he didn't put any water in the fire hydrants. I kind of don't buy into this like just abject, oh, he's just like this horrible guy. I look forward to the entertainment aspect of it, like whether there's a presidential bid or anything like that. But it's easy for, oh, I'm going to touch on transgenderism too. It's easy for like when you just get absolutely dismantled without any like form of reprieve, you know, like without any safe haven. You know, it's like if I debate with you, like I want to invite you over to my house for dinner afterwards, you know, and it's like it's easy to walk away from that and be like, fuck this guy, you know, like that. Like Newsom probably, when he thinks back on some of these conversations that he has with conservatives, it's like, but in a way, like it brings out the brash nature. But Michael Savage, for example, that I've listened to for years, and I don't agree with everything he says. I listen to a lot of rhetoric that I don't agree with, no matter how many times it's repeated. But like there was a level of like affability between them, I'd say. But in terms of the transgenderism, you know, like we have this 10% of the population that's gay. I think as of like many years ago, it sort of was established. This is a figure that I'm just sort of, I'm pretty sure it's 10%. And so when transgenderism became acceptable, like there is a certain subsection of that homosexual community that became transgender, you know. And I've heard Charlie Kirk, he had like this gotcha moment where he's talking with like a right-wing adherent, and he kind of sort of like traps him into this. He's like, do you think it was ridiculous that gay people were at this and that? And the guy's like, yes, I think it's ridiculous. And Charlie Kirk's like, well, then you're not a conservative. Because Charlie Kirk was supporting basically gayness. And like gayness has sort of been supported, I don't know, I think the Christian ideology has something else to say, but I feel like respectable society, I don't know if we can even say that, sort of accepts that gayness exists. And so there are gay Republicans, you know, and so forth. But now, like, I've met several transgender people. I had a date with a person who was transgender who never had it in their profile. And I'm not ashamed to admit it, you know. And I got in the car, I was like, there's no way, like, I'm sorry, you know. And you know, and I have certain views that I've discussed previously, but I support transgender. Like, I don't support with the kids. I don't support transgender in women's sports, and I think that there's a lot of like emotional sort of manipulation that goes into like transitioning into this sort of spectrum of reality. But like, I respect transgender people, and gay and transgender people happen to be like very intelligent too, and very activist. So it's like, why would you not want them in your camp, sort of? And it's almost like Charlie Kirk missed the opportunity to sell these people because, and I'm gonna be honest, I don't know his exact views, but I know Ben Shapiro, at least from his earlier views, he was saying that it's basically a mental disability. And like, if you look at the statistics, you know, you're going to see more mental instability in these demographics, for example. But a lot of times the line between genius and madness can be very blurred. You know, and I respect that. I respect people who are on the edge, sort of, as I've stated previously. So it's easy for, like, if there's a political pundit who makes a lot of sense, who's super smart, who's bringing up these big picture realities, and then they just come out with it real quick, like, yeah, transgenderism is a mental disorder, then how easy does these people that you had sold, these people you had like these great ideas, and they were like, dude, I can follow that, and then it's like, it's a mental disorder. You know, and I didn't specifically hear him say this, but I'm just drawing the big picture, like looking at it like a chess game, looking at it from my own entertainment perspective, like who can be the grandmaster of the grandmasters to capture, you know, to capture basically the compassion and the reality in the computer sort of like physics. You know, is that we have these super smart, it's funny because I'm learning graphics mathematics right now, and I found a channel where there's a transgender woman who's teaching the mathematics, and it's fascinating, you know. But there's also that point about the way Trump says it's transgender for everyone, and I love Trump. I love watching Trump. You know, I'm not a disrespecter in general. I could make a whole thing about Trump if anybody likes what I'm saying. I can like break down all the dynamics of this like Trump effect and like the give and take. So they gave so hard when he was out of power for 4 years, and then there's also the take like in this situation as well. I have mentioned to my friend that I thought it was politically dangerous, possibly for the country, to introduce doubt into the elections, but it's easy. I remember Trump during his in 2016 before the election, he was talking about it's rigged. Like, it's easy to see that it's rigged from the perspective because big government people who are like in favor of like more government programs, they work for the government, they're paid by taxes. Like, it's so easy to see them to be like in cahoots with people who will get them paid more, you know. And it's so easy, like all these cahoots and everything, like through the media and like the intelligence agencies, and like it's like this big structure that's, you know, Javier Milei overtook like a dynastic presidency in Argentina, and I know the past president is being charged with crimes, you know, and it's just easy to get that like embedded when your political family is like embedded in this big picture. It's easy to be like, oh, don't worry guys, like we'll spread it around, you know. And and it's like this sort of risk-free, like restful existence where like everyone's getting paid, we're helping the poor, you know, we're being strong on the world stage, we're supporting Ukraine and so forth. And I do support Ukraine, but these things are fascinating for me and very entertaining for me, and hopefully are entertaining for you. But it's also entertaining to talk about it in the first place. But like, I see, I just randomly cut off here. All right, so it's easy to go where people don't speak English, you know. And speaking English, it's almost like you're a comrade, you know. It's like you see somebody, you say something in English to them, and they reciprocate, you know, or they don't reciprocate, or you say something and they don't speak English, or it's like a person at a store, and there are a lot of people that aren't really that social, like they're working all the time. Like, I talk to the people at 24 Hour Fitness who speak English, by the way, but you know, chit chat and so forth. And it'd be people that you know for months and months. And there was this woman, I thought I had more here. There was this woman at the store who I've known for many months, but she doesn't speak a lick of English, you know, just a word here or there, you know. And I went in one day and I was chit-chatting. Well, I said something in Spanish. I was like, por favor. And she was like, she didn't know what I was saying. Like, it almost seemed like she didn't even know. She's like, get away from me. She's like, stand back from me. And I was like, how crazy is it that I'm sitting here, I've known this woman for months. She doesn't know a word of what I'm saying. She sees me as like a threat, and language brings people together. I would have known about her. She would have known about my school. She would have known about my military experience. She would have known about my artwork. You know what I mean? We would have learned about each other and connected. Our lives would have been better. She'd been here for years, working in the capacity of a cashier, talking to people every day. Won't even learn a lick of English. Not a lick. And then suddenly I'm this bad guy, And I know there are a lot of communities that don't even really engage with English-speaking community. Like, there are communities of Chinese, there are communities of Korean. I fully support the cosmopolitan nature of America, but it's like we all deserve to be ingratiated with one another, and it's easy to seem like an outsider when you're living in this city that's secluded from the rest of all the different races, and you just have Korean people speaking Korean with Korean stores and everything like that. I'm not saying that you need to forcibly integrate that, but I'm just saying learn English. You're in America, learn English. And I understand the lack that can look like a lack of compassion, but hopefully you sort of see it in my demeanor that I don't hate you if you don't speak English. I'll use Google Translate and have a conversation with you. I'll fix your car I'm a mechanic. I'll help rake your leaves. If your knee hurts and you're an older person, because this is what I believe in, is community activism basically, and that people, once they build up bonds between each other, it can increase the quality of the political and social spheres that we live in. So I guess it was about Charlie Kirk, so I should end on something related to Charlie Kirk. I probably should have written down, but I think it's horrible that he died. I'm watching him a lot. And I guess I'll just throw in there, it's easy to cancel Charlie Kirk's life and cancel Charlie Kirk off of Google and cancel me from ever having seen Charlie Kirk. My buddy told me he died and I was like, who's Charlie Kirk? But it turns out he's the biggest name out there. And why didn't I ever see his reels? Are we living in these tubes that are manipulated by big corporations? Obviously that's not exactly the case, and it sounds kind of conspiratorial, but I used to make podcasts like this a lot, and Google owns YouTube. I get no views on YouTube. This will be on YouTube, nobody will watch it. Not that I said I'm not a podcaster, I'm not a professional, I'm not that entertaining, I'm not that good looking or whatever. So it's not it's on Google to make me famous. It's not on Facebook to make people like my Facebook posts. But it is just kind of ironic that it's they canceled his life, I never even knew him, and I'm an avid listener to AM radio and talk shows and podcasts, and I've been researching different things and stuff. How did I not know this dude existed? And I'll tell you, I was talking to my buddy when I heard his talk with Newsome. He was vicious, a cruel, vicious slayer when he talked to Newsome, and I was like, this sounds very presidential. But then it's almost like when you have a presidential demeanor, your time is very important, so he could have been definitely a political guy, and a lot of the politicians deferred to him and had a lot of respect for him. And Turning Point USA is a very contentious and big and powerful company that has a lot of sponsors and donors, so forth. So he could have done, I could have seen him in the presidential realm. But when he was talking about, I watched the most recent podcast before he passed away, and he was talking to, I don't know if it was Chrissy Nelm or somebody from ICE or something, and he's talking about, we need to arrest the mayors, we need to arrest the mayors. And I was talking to my buddy, I was like, I don't know if necessarily arresting the mayors would be exact, but if you talk to an unbiased AI, they might say the mayors broke the law by impeding law enforcement, but also it's wrong that Trump got arrested too. And if you look at the law says that he can't have the classified documents or whatever. So it's almost like I'm being ChatGPT and Google in a way, and making the law more compassionate, that I feel we have to do when we see these perspectives from a political perspective. So I don't agree with arresting the mayors because they're coming out and defending their constituents and getting in the way. But I think it's just an extra step that you have to take to step around the mayors and to enforce the law and to try to be, to try to make the world a better place. But a lot of the divisive rhetoric that we see is the give and take, is that like, you can try to play nice, but I don't know if Trump if he's even the kind of guy that would just like play nice. But I personally am, like, I always overlook like past wrongs, but Trump is like, well, you guys arrested me, you guys tried to put me in jail, you tried to, there are all these lawsuits, all these criminal like proceedings and everything. I personally think it's bullshit, and I also think that the arresting of the mayors is bullshit. But there's also like the complexity of just looking at the different strings of logic that go into the whole thing. But there's other stuff. I've been watching quite a bit, but I guess I won't get into anything else. I can't believe I talked for a whole 40 minutes. This is my first take, by the way. But then again, I did a podcast before that basically failed. So check out skyoptional.com. I'm still in school at the New York Film Academy for animation. I'm learning ZBrush right now. I'm getting really good at ZBrush. I love ZBrush, although it's an incredibly irritating program to learn. Adobe Substance Painter. I just opened back up the Adoration of the Magi, which is the whole reason I got into animation in the first place, because I have a painting called the Adoration of the Magi that was presented at the Pacific Design Studio, or Pacific Design Center, by MASH Gallery. It didn't sell, but the reason I got into animation is because I'm recreating this painting in 3D. So I just opened it back up basically, and so I'm back into the project for the first time since I started school. And I have a huge digital painting coming out called Biker Mariachi. You can see on my socials I have like this Egyptian lady that's just a detail of the painting, but I'm making one of the buildings in the Adoration building basically like an art gallery. So the camera's gonna like virtually go into this like massive palisade art gallery and like discover this painting in one of the rooms. It's gonna be pretty cool. Hopefully you guys check it out. Hopefully you watched all. Let me know in the comments if you watched all the way, and I hope everybody has a wonderful day.